Funding for Big Cypress Swamp, the Western Everglades, is provided by the Collier County Tourist Development Council, the South Florida Water Management District, the Friends of Big Cypress, and the Friends of Fakahatchee.
I'm Clyde Butcher. Welcome to my backyard. I live in the heart of the Big Cypress Swamp, along with a lot of other creatures. It's been my privilege to photograph the Big Cypress for the past 25 years of its diverse landscape. Come join me through this great adventure through the Big Cypress Swamp.
Ours is a water world, from salty seas to freshwater lakes, from the ice caps to the rainforests, from crystal aquifers to the rivers that flow through our veins. Water makes up 70% of the Earth's surface. Who would have guessed that one of the most plentiful things on Earth would suddenly become one of the most valuable? In the new millennium, water and the ecosystems which depend upon it are under siege. This crisis is being played out vividly in our wetlands. South Florida contains some of the most famous wetlands on Earth. Most folks know about the Eastern Everglades, made up of a national park and water conservation areas which encompass a sea of grass stretching as far as the eye can see. Less well known and perhaps even more mysterious and varied is its neighbor to the west, the Big Cypress Swamp. Together, these two areas form one huge ecosystem. Today, over 1 million acres of the richly diverse Everglades in southwest Florida is protected in a variety of public lands. But in the 1960s, this land was slated to be drained and developed, just like many areas of Florida had been over the decades. Through the efforts of those who have a deep connection to this land and had a vision of seeing it protected for years to come, this unique region of the greater Everglades remains intact, a natural area where rare plants and animals can be found, and where people can recreate, escape the hustle and bustle of congested coastal cities, and enjoy the wilds of natural Florida in the Big Cypress Swamp. Big Cypress itself is a jigsaw of wildlife refuges, parks, and sanctuaries, recreational areas, private camps, and Native American communities. Some overlap, each has its own character, but all are bound together by a seasonally flowing river, a sheet of living water moving slowly across South Florida and into the Gulf of Mexico. Together, all the public lands in the Big Cypress Swamp region account for over 1 million acres.
One of the main reasons I started in my black and white photography is when my son was killed in an automobile accident. And I went to Big Cypress to kind of restore my soul. And one of my first pictures I took is called Ochopee. It was taken over this great prairie with cabbage palms and great thundering sky. I didn't realize at the time the whole foreground was cattails. I thought it was sawgrass.
The photograph became an emblem of Big Cypress. But to Butcher's surprise, it also contained some important clues about the ecosystem, about what's right with it, as well as what's wrong. Humans are native to Big Cypress. We've been here for thousands of years. The earliest people settled in the 10,000 islands. They dined on the local fish, scallops, oysters. They tossed aside the shells, forming middens, which are still in evidence today. By the 1500s, Spanish conquistadors and English explorers arrived on a feverish quest for gold. For the most part, they were disappointed. No treasure, no mythic fountains. In short, they did not stay, nor did they guess that one day water would become almost as precious as gold. Man was just one part of the whole. It wasn't until Florida joined the Union that these wetlands became a destination and a target.
And it's not a coincidence that this is where the Seminoles gravitated towards when they had to move south. You know, the U.S. Army soldiers who tromped through, they thought this was, you know, a horrible place. They said it was abominable, a hellhole, you know, a godforsaken swamp that we should leave to the Indians, loathsome and horrible and terrible and impenetrable. But the Indians saw that this was a place that could support life.
The last century has not exactly been a model of restraint.
The Everglades and Big Cypress and South Florida's natural resources were always seen as a commodity to be exploited, not just by evil, greedy people, but by progressive, conservationists, well-meaning people who saw a wasteland. Wetlands were wastelands, and conservation meant the opposite of waste. The dream of South Florida, people saw it as this blank canvas that they could write their dreams on, that they could create this empire of the Everglades with booming communities. All you had to do was just, you know, knock a few holes in some natural dikes and the Everglades would practically drain itself.
In order for new towns to go up, the wetlands had to be made dry. And so the Army Corps of Engineers was brought in to reshape the landscape. And the vast swamp was carved up in a way that drastically disrupted the natural flow of water.
For a century, water was seen as the enemy of the people of Florida. We were all about getting rid of it. How can we drain it? How can we dike it? How can we squirt it this way when we don't want it? How can we capture it? How can we suck it out of the Everglades and out of the aquifers so that we can grow our civilization?
When the Everglades National Park was first proposed, it included a large portion of the Big Cypress Swamp. But Congress did not approve the full purchase, and Big Cypress Swamp portion was subsequently bargained away. 20 years later, this unprotected area faced its most severe threat to date, the building of an international jetport. The hustle and bustle of Miami International Airport, with all its surrounding congestion, was scheduled to be recreated right here, in the heart of the swamp. Dade County officials made speeches about man's manifest destiny to conquer the wilderness. They promised to raise that useless bog and pave it over. Envisioning a city of 500,000 people, they rushed to build the first runway so that the first plane could land.
But they overplayed their hand. They didn't understand that, this was the Earth Day era. And people were starting to understand that, the water we drink, the air we breathe, the landscapes we like, that it's important to people as well as to the bugs and bunnies and yellow-bellied sapsuckers.
A young television reporter named Joe Browder and rising politician Nathaniel Reed were among those who spearheaded the resistance.
Joe saw his first mud stake in Big Cypress. He said he thought it was smiling at him. And he used to just sit there neck deep in one of those swamps and just watch the light change. And he just loved this place. The notion that this silent majesty was going to be overrun by trucks and planes, there was going to be a takeoff every minute. He wasn't going to have that. And so Joe started to fight. He didn't just complain about it, he organized.
The key was helping to find lots of people with very diverse interests, but a common thread of love for the Everglades, who in their own ways could contribute.
Browder managed to build a coalition of unlikely cohorts, all of whom wanted to put a halt to the proposed jet port. Not to mention the real estate boom in surrounding swampland which had been triggered by it. He united some traditional antagonists, environmentalists and hunters, as well as Miccosukee Indians, Hispanics, labor unions, liberals and conservatives. Some local folk proved invaluable when the new developers arrived to survey Big Cypress.
They couldn't carry out a plan like that unless they first surveyed and platted the area. How do surveyors get around out there? Well, they needed somebody in an airboat to drive them out there. Who were a lot of the airboat drivers? People who, at night when they drove their airboats, said they were frogging, but they weren't after frogs, they were after alligators. The alligator poachers, who loved the Everglades as deeply as anyone else. The poachers would call me in my Audubon office and say, okay, so-and-so company has hired so-and-so survey company to go and plat such and such a place. And the word is they're doing it because they want to create a drainage district there. Audubon went out and bought a few acres right in the middle of this place. And then when the people filed to create their drainage district, we sued and said, you can't do that because we bought this land to enjoy it in its natural state. And we won the suit.
Meanwhile, Governor Claude Kirk had just appointed the state's first environmental advisor, Nathaniel Reed. The Jetport project was already in the works when Reed flew over the area in a small airplane. What he saw below was disturbing. Immediately upon his return to Tallahassee, Reed pored over hydrological maps of South Florida.
It didn't take a genius to figure out that if the jetport was built and developed, and a high-speed railroad train was built crossing Water Conservation Area 3 to get to Miami, that would interfere with the flow again. The heart of the Everglades system is flow. And so the recognition that I had to change the governor hit me like a lightning bolt.